YouTube is great for two types of videos related to photography. It's great for tutorials. In other words, if you forgot how to do something in Photoshop or Lightroom and you just want a quick refresher, YouTube is absolutely great for that. YouTube is also great for gear reviews, whether it's cameras, lenses, accessories. Someone has probably done a review. What YouTube is less good at is giving you a high concentration of photographic knowledge in a short amount of time. And these three books, in my opinion, are some of the best you can buy for quickly improving your photography. So in order, they are The Photographer's Eye, a graphic guide by Michael Freeman, Understanding Exposure by Brian Peterson, and Light, Science, and Magic. And we're going to go over these three books really quickly in this video. Photography is not rocket science. It's not complicated. You could hypothetically learn the whole thing through trial and error, or read any of the many great books on the subject. These three just happen to be really good at what they set out to do. You don't have to buy them. You can always find them at your local library because these are quite popular books. If you've ever wondered how photographers decide where to place subjects within the frame, how large the subject needs to be in the frame, whether it needs to be at an angle, how do you arrange multiple subjects? Do you do it like this? Do you overlap them? This is a very good book that gets into the nitty-gritty, but with plenty of examples. And this entire book you can finish in just a couple of hours, even if you read every word, because most of it is pictures with specific examples of photographic composition. The book is divided into 10 sections in order: photographic framing, enclosing the scene, the thought process that happens even before composition, as in what to include and what to leave out; placement, where to place the subject or subjects within the frame, and that's when we get into the famous rule of thirds. And you can say, well, there are no rules to photography. You can do it however you like. It's a hobby. Let's not take it too seriously. But there are rules at the end of the day. Humans perceive certain images to be just more visually pleasing than others. And if that's your intention, then this book is a great choice. Next, he gets into dividing. How should the frame be split? Should it be symmetrical? Where to put the horizon? How to divide dark and light areas of a picture. How to think about where to place one color versus another. Next, he demonstrates various visual elements such as horizontal, vertical lines, diagonals, curves, shapes. There are examples of rhythm in photography, as well as patterns. How to recognize patterns and how to use patterns to your advantage to make certain subjects stand out. He talks about viewpoints. Should you shoot from up high, from down low? Is the subject close? Is it distant? How much precision is required? There's also a discussion about optics, when to use a wide-angle lens, when to use a telephoto lens, basics about tilt and shift for perspective control lenses, and some general tips about depth of field. Examples are also provided related to motion, how to freeze motion, how to show subjects moving into a frame, moving out of a frame. There's a chapter on color, the differences between rich colors, pastels, muted colors, color themes, color palettes. Finally, the last two chapters are on juxtaposition of different elements, for example, compression, stacking, layering, silhouettes, as well as a chapter on combining, which gets more into digital manipulation, graphic design, for example, creating composites for multiple exposures, layering photos on top of each other, and so on. I would recommend you read this after the first book, because the first book you can apply composition skills to any kind of photography, even with your smartphone, where you're not going to be manipulating shutter speed too much. But Understanding Exposure is one of the best books for just getting introduced to the important concepts of aperture, shutter speed, ISO, how they relate to one another. So this is really great if you're in the process of learning about photography and you don't know, when should you use a very high shutter speed, when should you use a wide open aperture, when should you close down the aperture, how to choose an appropriate ISO for the shot you want to take. All of this stuff is very, very clearly explained in this book. And I think it's the fastest way to learn this stuff, even faster than watching any kind of videos about it. After introducing the basics, there's also discussion about each section. For example, when it comes to aperture, how do you choose an f-stop based on the kind of story you want to tell? How to choose an f-stop when you're doing macro photography, because the depth of field conversation changes radically at close distances. How to choose an appropriate shutter speed, again, based on the speed of your subject, whether you want to freeze motion, whether you want to imply motion, or whether you're panning. What are useful shutter speeds to start off with when you're thinking of doing long exposure, whether it's in an urban scene, or maybe you're doing the classic flowing water. After he covers the basics, he does get into some very useful information about light, how to go about looking for the best light, differences between front light, back light, side light, lighting differences in sunny and overcast conditions, how to make sure that you're metering properly, because sometimes your camera meter can get tricked based on certain lighting situations. There's a brief section on filters, circular polarizers, graduated ND filters, and taking multiple exposures. And finally, there's a section about flash, everybody's favorite topic, right? Flash, if you've never tried photography with a speed light, you owe it to yourself to get involved in flash photography. It's so much fun, opens up a world of possibilities when you're not just limited to the natural light outside. You will learn the basics of correct flash exposure, the difference between manual flash and TTL, how to use flash in conjunction with aperture and shutter speed, how to use flash as a fill light, how to use the little pop-up flash on your camera, right? This little guy here. A little bit about wireless flash triggers, a few words about gels, and also rear curtain sync. So between these two books, I think you're well covered for basic photography education. Unless you're a professional with deep experience in photographic lighting, I can guarantee you're going to learn something new in this book. This is more of a reference book that you'll keep coming back to again and again. If you're interested in complex lighting situations, for example, lighting metal objects, glass objects, or even if you decide to get into professional studio portraits, this is an invaluable resource. Just briefly, they go over the main principles of light. They explain the difference between transmission, absorption, reflection. There's discussions about the angle of light, variables such as distance to subject, the size of the light, the types of different lighting modifiers you can use, how to work with not only one light but multiple lights in conjunction. You'll learn what a gobo is if you don't know already, how to use lighting to add depth to a photo, tonal variation, how to use techniques to eliminate annoying reflections and other distractions, how to take pictures of liquids and glass. If you ever asked to take pictures of whiskey, for example, you would consult this book. Very helpful. And there's an extensive section about lighting for portraiture. For example, the differences between broad and short lighting, how you would use a key light in conjunction with a fill light and a hair light and a kicker, difference between low key and high key. And you can take all this knowledge and bring it back to your natural light work. The same principles apply. It's just that we have no control over the natural light. But once you learn to work with artificial light, you can better understand the effects the natural light will have, and will have a better idea of where to look for the best light. There is a discussion about choosing the right kind of gear for your use case. For example, putting together a basic studio or traveling light with portable strobes, and techniques for improving the quality of your light, feathering, mixing colors, bounce flash, and so on and so forth. There are many, many specific examples with diagrams about the angle of light and where you would place the light in relation to the subject and the camera. So between these three, I think you can get a pretty solid photographic education, and it's going to be a much more efficient use of your time than watching YouTube videos about these subjects, because a YouTuber will, for every page in this book, they will find a way to turn it into a 10-minute video with a 2-minute long introduction and a 1-minute long goodbye. Okay, top 5 ways to do this, top 8 things you're not doing for lighting. Here you're just getting the information in a no-nonsense manner. This is going to do more for your photography than buying another camera or lens. If you have experience with these books or you have other book recommendations, let us know in the comment section. And as always, thank you for watching. and subscribe for more.